show up, you disappear, you make plans, you don't follow through, and now you're here, like, professing your love. Where's our relationship? In your head?
You're just a little toy that keeps locked in a little room. Don't go anywhere, don't see anyone, just stay there and paint until I come back to fuck you.
Ellis is gonna be here in 45 minutes, so I suggest you get the fuck out of my painting.
When you think of Jules Vaughn, what's the first image that pops into your head? For most of us, it's that iconic entrance from the pilot of season 1. A girl with pastel pink hair, glittering eyelids, and a plaid skirt gliding through the gray suburban streets of East Highland on a bicycle. In a world defined by Rue's dark, suffocating addiction and Nate's toxic, hyper-masculine terror, Jules was a burst of technicolor. Rue's narration literally framed her as an angel, a miracle, a living, breathing, manic pixie dream girl sent from another planet to save a drowning soul. To everyone around her, and to us, the audience, Jules was the absolute center of gravity. But fast forward 5 years to the beginning of season 3, and that vibrant center has completely collapsed. When we re-encounter Jules in early adulthood, the pastel streaks are gone, the glitter is gone. The bicycle has been replaced by a static, sterile, high-rise penthouse in downtown Los Angeles. She isn't soaring through the streets anymore, she's staring out of a floor-to-ceiling glass window, looking incredibly small, incredibly quiet, and incredibly isolated. This drastic shift is what we're exploring today. The decentering of Jules Vaughn. Decentering is a heavy word, and in Jules' case, it operates on 2 fascinating levels. On a character level, Jules spent the first 2 seasons fighting tooth and nail to escape being the center of other people's universes. She didn't want to carry the crushing weight of Rue's sobriety, and she didn't want to be the secret, idealized object of Nate's closeted shame. But on a meta-narrative level, her escape came at a brutal cost. By successfully removing herself from the toxic orbits of East Highland, she was pushed to the absolute periphery of the show itself. In her quest to find the formless, free life of a sea blob, Jules was sidelined, marginalized, and ultimately forgotten by the very story she once anchored. Today, we're diving deep into this tragic, liberating transformation, looking at how her search for freedom led her straight into a new kind of gilded cage, and how a single, violent boundary officially shattered her role as a savior. Chapter 1: The Art of the Specimen. To understand where Jules lands in Season 3, we have to look at the wreckage of her transition into adulthood. After high school, Jules did what she always dreamed of doing. She went to art school. But art school is expensive, exhausting, and highly competitive. Desperate to find a way to fund her creative dreams without losing her soul to a soul-crushing retail grind, Jules takes the advice of her roommate, Vivian. She enters the transactional, highly structured world of sugar dating. This is where she meets Ellis, a wealthy, successful plastic surgeon played with a chillingly sterile charm by Sam Trammell. On paper, this looks like the ultimate win-win for Jules. Ellis pays for a gorgeous downtown penthouse, gives her a healthy monthly allowance, and in return, he asks for absolute discretion and exclusivity. Jules genuinely believes she has gamed the system. She thinks she has finally achieved that elusive sea blob philosophy she articulated in her special episode, to exist without the societal binaries of work and gender, free to paint, free to live, and completely independent. But as is always the case with this show, the illusion of freedom is just the pre-sales pitch for a brand new trap. Because Jules hasn't actually escaped the male gaze, she has just sold the exclusive rights to it. Ellis is a plastic surgeon, a man whose entire professional and personal life is dedicated to carving, molding, and curating the human body into an idealized form. And to Ellis, Jules is the ultimate masterpiece. In one of the most quietly, deeply unsettling scenes of the season, Ellis explains why he is so obsessed with her. Because Jules transitioned at the age of 14, she bypassed male puberty entirely. To a man who spends his days trying to reverse the natural aging process of wealthy women, Jules' body is a biological marvel. She is poreless, untouched by time, and perfect. Think about how deeply twisted that is. Ellis has completely commodified her transness, turning her identity and her physical body into a rare clinical aesthetic specimen. She isn't a human being to him. She is a piece of fine art to be collected, displayed in a high-end gallery penthouse, and kept entirely to himself. This toxic dynamic reaches its symbolic peak in the highly controversial mummification scene. When Ellis wraps Jules' body entirely in tight, clear plastic wrap, Jules giggles. She treats it like a playful, avant-garde game of intimacy and trust. But structurally, the visual metaphor is devastating. Jules wanted to be formless and free, but here she is literally encased in plastic, unable to move, completely reshaped and controlled by the hands of an older, powerful man. The tragic irony here is that Jules' adult life is just a mirror image of her teenage trauma. In high school, she built her femininity around what men desired, seeking validation from aggressive, anonymous older men online. As an adult, she thinks she has reclaimed her power by putting a high price tag on that validation. But the dynamic hasn't changed. She has traded East Highland's emotional projections for Ellis's clinical, physical projections. She is still sitting on a pedestal, frozen, wrapped in plastic, and waiting for someone else to tell her who she is. Chapter 2: The Proposal and the Slap. If Chapter 1 is about Jules trying to escape her old life through a new kind of physical objectification, Chapter 2 is the moment her past collides violently with her present, and it centers on what is easily the most intense, claustrophobic, and raw scene of the entire season, the 6-minute scene in Jules' apartment where Rue unexpectedly resurfaces. By this point in the story, Rue is living in a waking nightmare. She's drowning in drug debt, acting as a high-stakes mule for Lori, and working as a manager in a strip club for Alamo. She's desperate, frantic, and rapidly running out of places to hide. So she does what addicts in crisis so often do. She retreats to the last place she remembers feeling safe. She shows up at Jules' penthouse. And then she proposes. It is a manic, breathless proposal. Rue talks about running away, about starting over, about getting married and building a quiet, normal life together. But let's look past the romantic tragedy of this moment and analyze what Rue is actually asking for. This proposal is a prime example of magical thinking. To Rue, marriage isn't a mature commitment to a partner, it's a desperate life raft. Rue is still operating under the exact same high school fantasy we saw in Season 1. She believes that Jules is an angel who possesses the magical, mystical power to save her from her own self-destruction. Rue is basically saying, if you marry me, I will be safe. If you marry me, I won't die. Once again, the crushing, impossible burden of Rue's life is placed squarely on Jules' shoulders. But Jules is no longer that terrified, codependent teenager who stayed up all night staring at her phone, paralyzed by the fear that if she didn't text Rue back, Rue would relapse. 5 years of distance, art school, and isolation have changed her. She doesn't cry. She doesn't hold Rue. Instead, she slaps her. It is a shocking, violent, and incredibly sudden moment. When the episode aired, it polarized the fanbase. A lot of viewers found the slap to be cruel, an unprovoked act of physical aggression against an addict who was clearly spiraling. But if we analyze Jules' journey, that slap is actually the most liberating, self-preservational thing she has ever done. To understand why, you have to remember the sheer weight that Jules carried in high school. Remember when Rue's mother, Leslie, hugged Jules and thanked her for keeping her daughter clean? That was a parent handing a teenager the life and death responsibility for another child's survival. It was a beautiful moment on the surface, but psychologically, it was a death sentence for Jules' own autonomy. For years, Jules' entire existence was conditioned on Rue's sobriety. By slapping Rue, Jules is violently refusing to step back on that savior pedestal. The slap isn't an act of malice, it's a desperate, necessary act of self-defense. It's Jules screaming, "I am not your cure. I am not your reason to live. I am not your angel." She is shattering the fantasy of the magical savior once and for all. It is a brutal boundary, but it represents the first time in the entire series where Jules actively chooses her own survival over Rue's comfort. She refuses to let Rue drown her again. But as we'll see in the next chapter, breaking free from the role of a savior is never a clean process. By shattering the mirror she held up for Rue, Jules finally achieves her decentering, but she's about to find out just how cold and lonely the margins of the world can be. Chapter 3: The Sidelined Survivor. Now, we need to address the elephant in the room when it comes to Season 3. If you spent any time on social media while the final season was airing, you know that the fan reaction to Jules' storyline was, to put it mildly, incredibly polarized. A lot of viewers were flat out furious. After 2 seasons of being a co-lead, Hunter Schafer's screen time was cut drastically. Jules was barely in some of the middle episodes, and when she did appear, she was locked away in that sterile downtown penthouse, completely isolated from the rest of the cast. On a meta level, it felt like Sam Levinson had simply run out of ideas for her. It felt like Jules had been forgotten. But if we look past the production drama and analyze this choice through a purely narrative lens, Jules' marginalization becomes the most brilliant, tragic paradox of the entire series. Think about the absolute chaos of everyone else's lives in Season 3. The show essentially transformed into a high-stakes, anxiety-inducing thriller. Cassie is spiraling into the dark world of OF. Nate's psychological issues are mutating into something even more dangerous. Marriages are imploding, and Rue is running for her life from the DEA and dangerous drug lords like Alamo and Lori. It is a relentless, exhausting machine of sensationalized trauma. And right at the center of that machine is Rue. Her gravity is so immense that anyone who gets too close to her is pulled into the meat grinder. But where is Jules? She's sitting quietly in her penthouse. She isn't part of the drug stings. She isn't part of the screaming matches. She is completely, utterly sidelined. And in the world of Euphoria, being sidelined is the only way to survive. There is a profound protective mercy in the writing here. Every single character who remained at the absolute center of the show's dramatic gravity was ultimately destroyed. Rue's addiction finally catches up to her in the most permanent way possible. Nate's empire of secrets collapses into ash. The high-energy, high-stakes drama of East Highland ended in a graveyard. By being forgotten by the plot, Jules was kept safe. Her isolation wasn't just a creative oversight, it was her preservation. To finally break the cycle of being everyone's emotional savior, Jules had to accept a very harsh reality. She had to become irrelevant to their stories. She had to sit in the quiet, boring, and sometimes deeply lonely space of her own life, even if it meant being left out of the grand finale of her friends' lives. Her marginalization was her price of admission to survival. While everyone else was burning down the house, Jules was the only one standing on the lawn, watching the smoke from a safe distance. Chapter 4: The Fiery Canvas. This brings us to the devastating series finale and the quiet, almost wordless resolution of Jules' entire journey. When Rue tragically overdoses on fentanyl-laced Percocet, the news hits the remaining survivors like a physical blow. For Jules, it is a deeply complicated grief. The last time she saw Rue, she had slapped her and slammed the door on her desperate proposal. She had chosen her own survival, but now she has to live with the heavy, haunting knowledge that the girl she loved is gone forever. In the past, a crisis like this would have sent Jules spiraling back into her old coping mechanisms. She would have sought out the validation of aggressive older men, or she would have let Ellis wrap her in another layer of psychological plastic just to feel numb. But in the finale, Jules does something different. She goes back to her penthouse, she picks up a paintbrush, and she starts to paint. We don't get a grand dramatic monologue explaining her feelings. Instead, we're left with a long, quiet sequence of Jules looking at a massive, finished canvas. It's a wild, chaotic, and incredibly vibrant painting. It's filled with fiery oranges, deep, bruising purples, and chaotic brushstrokes that visually scream. And right in the middle of this beautiful, messy storm of color, you can see the faint, abstract silhouette of Rue. This painting is the most important moment of Jules' entire character arc. Think back to her relationship with Ellis in Chapter 1. Ellis wanted to turn Jules into his own personal art piece. He wanted to curate her, to freeze her, to keep her poreless and perfect under glass. But with this painting, Jules officially reclaims the brush. She is no longer the canvas for other people to paint their fantasies onto. She is the artist. She is the one defining her own history, her own grief, and her own love. The painting doesn't romanticize what she had with Rue, nor does it demonize it. It's messy, violent, and beautiful all at once. By putting her trauma onto the canvas, Jules finally achieves that formless, free state of being she has been chasing since high school. She doesn't need Nate's secrets, and she no longer has to carry the burden of Rue's survival. She has transformed her pain into something entirely her own. She has finally become the sea blob, fluid, unstructured, and entirely free, even if she is completely alone in the water. Conclusion: beyond the savior complex. So where does that leave Jules Vaughn? Over the course of 3 seasons, we have watched one of the most complex, frustrating, and deeply human character arcs on modern television. When we first met Jules, she was a mirror. Everyone who looked at her saw exactly what they needed to see. Rue saw an angel who could cure her addiction. Nate saw a forbidden desire that could expose his deepest fears. Ellis saw a pristine, poreless specimen of aesthetic perfection. And for a long time, Jules was willing to smash herself into whatever shape those people required, desperate to be loved, desperate to be validated, and desperate to be a savior. But the tragedy of the savior complex is that you can't save anyone else without drowning yourself. Jules' journey was never about finding a perfect, neat, happy ending. She didn't get the girl, she didn't get the glamorous art school degree, and she didn't get a healthy, normal family. She made terrible, selfish choices. She betrayed people, she hurt Rue, and she isolated herself in a glass tower. But that messy, imperfect reality is exactly what makes her story so powerful. Jules Vaughn is a work in progress. By the end of the series, she isn't a hero and she isn't a villain. She's just a young woman who finally did the incredibly difficult, painful work of smashing the mirror she was holding for everyone else. She stopped trying to be an angel, and she finally allowed herself to be a human being. But what do you think? Was Jules' sideline journey in Season 3 a realistic portrayal of surviving a toxic environment? Or did the show do her character a disservice by pushing her to the margins? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next analysis.